Science fiction, a genre that entered the film world very soon after the magic of motion pictures was invented. In this video, we will examine the growth and change in how science fiction films handle the issue of race over the course of the 20th century, a time when race relations were very important and a controversial issue that changed and improved over time. When examining the growth of science fiction cinema over this time period, one might notice how the genre has a sparse representation of minorities, especially in its earlier years.
Miles, where do they come from? I don't know.
Thus, viewers that were tired of consistent all-white casts during this time were forced to face this grim reality.
What's that? You have no choice.
Of course, this does change over time, but this change is in direct relationship with the political and social climate of the world the movies were made in. In this video essay, I will show how and why the genre changed in the way it did, and show how the science fiction industry is not a medium of progressive ideas, but rather a follower of societal advances in race relations. The first movie we will examine is Blade Runner. Blade Runner takes place in Los Angeles in the year 2019. In this dystopian world, humans have created creatures called replicants, who are best classified under the word cyborg. These replicants were made to perform slave labor until they revolted and killed a number of people. Blade Runner is a special police officer whose sole purpose is to hunt and kill replicants. Los Angeles in 2019, where the movie takes place, depicts the city to have an extremely large Asian population. This is probably an emulation of how the early 1980s witnessed the rise of the Pacific Rim as an economic juggernaut, particularly Japan's burgeoning automobile industry. The phenomenal success of the Japanese import car prodded many American consumers and producers to reconsider the socio-economic feasibility of Made in America. Ridley Scott's Blade Runner was emblematic of the neoconservative racial paranoia present in the Reagan era. But with this large Asian representation in Blade Runner, for some unclear reason, there are 0 black characters in the film. Another very prominent movie that came out only 2 years after the release of Blade Runner was The Terminator. A movie so popular it became a series. Like Blade Runner, it had no major black characters, sparing Lieutenant Ed Traxler, who was killed off 1 hour and 2 minutes into the movie in a shootout with the cyborg called the Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. The killing off of the only major black character is an all too familiar element in many movies of that time. By the time the second movie had come out, the 80s had come and went, and with it the world saw the rise of many popular African American dominated rap groups, most notably the NWA. While the group endured a large amount of controversy owing to their music's explicit lyrics, which many viewed as being misogynistic, as well as its glorification of drugs and crime, and was even banned from many mainstream American radio stations, they exposed the world to the reality of growing up young and black on the streets of South Central Los Angeles during the 1980s crack epidemic. They undoubtedly changed the world, and the second Terminator came just after their prime years. One of the members of the group, O'Shea Jackson, better known by his rapper name Ice Cube, says it best. Everything in the world came after this group. We changed pop culture on all levels, not just music, We changed it on TV, in movies, on radio, everything. We can see this emulated in Terminator 2: Judgment Day. We have a black character with much more significance than the one in the first film. Dr. Miles Bennett Dyson, portrayed by Joe Morton, is the original inventor of the neural net processor, which would lead to the development of Skynet, an intelligent computer system intended to control the United States military, but which would later achieve sentience and launch a global war of extermination against humanity. Not only is he an extremely important character to the plot of the story, but he is a gifted scientist that has a wife and 2 kids, a role that would stereotypically be held by a white person, especially at that time. Even though he does end up dying, his depiction and major role in the film shows the progress that is taking place as a result of the many cultural changes that happened in the 1980s. The 1990s were a very crucial time in the history of race relations and minorities in the media for many reasons. Probably one of the most important events that happened was the video of Rodney King being beaten by Los Angeles police on March 7, 1991. I'm sure being forced to watch this video has struck a nerve in you. So imagine how it affected the people of 1991 when they first saw this. This event propelled black activism against police brutality because it was the first time that there was hard, indisputable, widespread video evidence of police brutality. This, paired with a large population of black artists rising to fame and entering mainstream media in the 1990s, created an environment that science fiction films were more apt to cast minority actors. For example, movies like The Matrix, Independence Day, and I Am Legend are all examples of movies that came out in the late 90s and early 2000s that have much more minority representation than movies prior. The Matrix was an extremely popular movie when it came out and features a cast made up of a large portion of people of color, with characters like Morpheus and Tank, who are integral to the story and who also live to see the end of it. I Am Legend and Independence Day both feature a black protagonist who rose to fame during the 90s named Will Smith. The roles he played in these films were revolutionary because they were roles that in the past would have most definitely been played by white men. These roles weren't specially designed for a black character, thus Will Smith was cast for these more because of his confidence, looks, and acting skills, not his race. In I Am Legend, Smith plays a virologist and a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army who is trying to figure out the cure to a mysterious disease that has destroyed human life on Earth. And in Independence Day, he plays a captain in the U.S. Marine Corps who is trying to fight off the alien invasion that is threatening the entire Earth. Due to the major events and resulting societal changes that had happened in recent years, casting directors felt more comfortable casting someone like Will Smith for these kind of roles. Exiting the 90s and entering the 21st century, we see many revolutionary things happen in the US and the world. One of, and probably the most significant of these, was the election of the first African American president of the United States of America, Barack Obama, who held office from 2008 to 2016. This was the first time we saw a black man hold such a high position of power in our country. Thus, it only makes sense that 2 years after his years in office, a revolutionary science fiction film would come out, depicting black people in a higher position of status, wealth, and technological advancement than ever before. This film is none other than the Marvel's Black Panther. Black Panther, starring the very well-known and famous African-American actor Chadwick Boseman, came out in 2018 and features an almost complete black cast. But this alone was not revolutionary, as there have been many films in the past starring black people with high amounts of black actors cast in them. What made Black Panther different was its depiction of African society. It depicts a fictional society called Wakanda that is extremely technologically advanced and distinctly African at the same time. Two things that were not usually shown together. Films with largely black casts usually depicted black people in states of hardship, whether it be enslavement or living in crime-torn areas. But Black Panther is the first film to depict black people in a society where they are not under white people in matters of status, wealth, and technology. Commercially, Black Panther succeeded to be among the top 20 highest-grossing movies of all time. So by examining the growth and change of science fiction with regards to minority representation and depiction, we can see how major social and political events have shaped and molded science fiction into what it is today. So while science fiction has had revolutionary change over the past decades, we compare this change with the change of the world it was being produced in, and thus see how the genre was a product of its environment, and did not act alone in its gradual shift towards better depiction and representation of minorities. Thank you for watching.